What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a comedic spin on all the goings-on in the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and I come to you from the Great White North every Tuesday evening, Eastern Standard Time, fresh for download to listen to at work on Wednesday morning for everyone around the entire world, the globe, the round globe, as we've covered in the past. This podcast comes to you completely ad-free, and all that I ask is you subscribe on any podcasting platform or over on YouTube if that's your forte, and tell your friends about me either in person or with a share somewhere over on social media. Also, if you have a second, please go rate us 5 stars over on Apple Podcast. That helps the most, right? We've seen so much growth from people clicking on podcast ratings. It's actually like one of the biggest things you guys can do. So thank you for those of you that have rated us. Like I see clicks on weird podcasting platforms I didn't even know existed, but the name pops up because it tells me where they clicked from. So thank you guys so much for all your help there. This week marks one official entire year of the Laugh to Learn podcast, which is super crazy, super exciting. It has been such a fun time so far, and this year I have plans on growing to a much wider audience. So when I started this thing, I didn't really know where it was going to end up, didn't really know if it was going to last or anything, if I'd like doing it. I've been doing this for a long time in radio and podcasting, but I didn't really know if this would be something I liked spending my time doing, or if it would just be a couple of months and then I'd give up on it. But I'm at the point now where I think I'm really ready to give it the good push it needs to get that baby out. So really it starts next week because, well, I guess it starts this week because this is the first week of year 2, the first episode of year 2. But next week I'm going to be sitting down with Blaine from the band Sweet Tooth. So check out that band. They're all over Spotify if you haven't already. Really dope music. So of course we're going to be talking about music, but he's also really intelligent dude, so I'm looking forward to it. There's always, if you've listened to my other conversations, there's plenty of stuff to talk about, and it's they're my favorite episodes to do, so look for that next week. I'm really looking forward to it, and you guys should be too. I'm super hyped. If there's anything you want me to ask him about, anything you want us to talk about, send in your questions now, and definitely come back to check that episode out. Also, I'm working on a YouTube campaign, I guess you could say. So right now, I'm, of course, as I've mentioned before, my podcast is hosted through Podbean, which is they're a wicked company to be involved with. But YouTube has been denying Podbean's podcasts. So this is publicly out there. It's not like I'm just talking shit from the dark. Like they've mentioned it before. It's well known. I just had a pizza delivered, so I just got distracted for a second. But it's well known that that YouTube has been rejecting Podbean's podcasts for some unknown reason, and YouTube hasn't fixed it. So I'm kind of like, all right, I haven't put enough effort into YouTube, and I guess it's time to start doing that. So I have an idea. I've put together a few test videos, so I'm working on that right now. And I have a launch date of March 1st for this. It's going to make it really easy for you to share the podcast with people, focusing on single topics, because even in the past when I was on YouTube, you had to share a whole episode, and that kind of sucks. So I'm going to be clipping out sections of the podcast that are selected by me and a few folks around me, and building short videos that can be easily shared, so someone can just grab a bite-sized video, basically. Like if you hear a topic you really like, you can be like, hey, check this topic out. Quick 5-minute video. Hopefully they dig the podcast and they can get into it from there. So I have, like I said, a launch date in mind of March 1st. I got to convert these pop-up or these demo videos basically to legitimate videos. And so I have a whole bunch of content to launch from the beginning. And yeah, we're going to get to that in a couple of minutes for how I'm going to select the videos to put up to start. And then finally, as every single person listening definitely knows, I need to step up my social media game because I'm sleeping on it. This is something that when Twitter was new, I was really on top of. In college, we had a course where we had to get, I think it was like 3,000 Twitter followers, and I did it in about 4 or 5 days. Now, I really don't have that. I don't have the time really to put into it, so I have to figure that out. I have no choice. So that's something that I'm going to be working on. You can go hire a social media company and stuff, but I really want to do it on my own. I want to figure out how to do it and really get good at it. So that's more of a longer-term goal for this year surrounding the podcast. But you can go follow the Instagram at Laugh to Learn and reach out there on Twitter at Jacob Paveo. And we're just going to sort of figure some other things out this year as we go, but I'm super excited. There are lots of great things to look forward to this year, but we're still here at our very first episode of the year, so let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So I wanted to do a fun one this week, a real fun episode, and I think the best way to get into a new year is with a look back on all of the episodes so far that I've done. So I'm going to talk about my favorite ones to make, the ones I don't remember, and the ones I wish I could forget. And I know that's the most cliche thing you could ever say, but I said it. Basically, I'm just going to run down the list by title of all the podcasts I've released, and we're just going to try and figure out what I talked about and have fun doing it. And I'm also going to talk about, some behind-the-scenes stuff. Like at the very beginning of this episode we're recording right now, I was recording in mono, so you would have only been able to hear my voice out of the left side of the speaker. I screwed that up. That was my bad. But that's what happens sometimes. So, this is the second time I've gone through this. So there's tons of stories like that I have about the podcast that hopefully will come up as we go through it. And then this one, it's just going to be a fun week. So we're going to close by going through a load of funny stories from around the world because there's so much just negativity going on around the world right now. I figure next week I have this real fun interview. That's probably going to be mostly light. We might touch some heavier topics, but it should be mostly light conversation. I don't want it to be heavy this week too. Let's take 2 weeks off from all the stress and all the bullshit. Let's leave the politics and all that stuff at the door and just have some fun this week because, as each and every one of you already know, this is the Laugh to Learn podcast. Hey, check it out! It's the Laugh to Learn podcast! Let's go way, way, way back to February 6th of 2019. I was actually sitting in this very spot I am now, but I was getting ready to release my very first episode, and the first episode was a big one for me because for the longest time I didn't know what I wanted to talk about on the podcast. So I wanted to basically test where I could take this, where I could go with it. And as we go through, if you guys haven't heard any of these episodes, I really encourage you just write down the name of it and then look it up if it's something that you think you want to talk about. I'm going to quickly mention a whole bunch of them. I'm not going to go into detail about every episode, so don't freak out. But I'm going to talk about some of the fun ones. And this first episode is one that I'm definitely going to linger on for a minute because I got the idea for the podcast in I had a podcast on YouTube with my buddy Mate going back to the spring and summer of 2018, and it didn't really take off. Like at the beginning, we had some decent numbers, but as far as YouTube statistics are concerned, it didn't go anywhere, and it was just diving, and so we ended up stopping. But later in 2018, towards, like I said, like October, November, I got the itch. Like I really wanted to get back into it, but I was looking for someone to do it with. So I went around, I asked a few friends who were in the vicinity, because I don't want to do things remotely, as I've talked about on this show. I wanted to be in person, but no one really had the time or the drive to, it takes a lot of time and effort to be ready for episodes and to be pushing it out there to get people to listen to it. It's a shit ton of work, to be perfectly honest with you. But around November, I was like, no, I know what I want to do. I wanted to do, at first, I wanted to do a purely political podcast, like a teaching politics podcast, basically. Like, this is what's going on in the world, and, this is why it's important. This is why you need to understand it. So around then, I visualize things and write a lot of shit down. Like, I buy notebooks, like, I swear to God, maybe once a month I'll buy a set of notebooks, and I just write stuff down, and then I lose the notebook or throw it out or whatever. But so I started working on ideas for this podcast, and it's sort of just like reading it back as I was writing it. I was just like, this isn't entertaining, because I would be talking about stuff that I love, politics, if you haven't noticed already on this show. And I'd be talking about, or I should say writing about, the stuff I love, but I realized how dry it was and that no one wanted to sit here and listen to that. So I figured I had to do something different. This wasn't going to work, and I kind of lingered on it, and I really wanted to also try stand-up comedy, which some people might know, but most probably won't. And when it came down to it, the local comedy club only has an open mic night once a week on Tuesdays, ironically, at 10 o'clock. And I start work Wednesday at 6 or 6:30. So that wasn't going to work for me. That's kind of what happens when you live in a smaller town. There's a few like monthly open mics and stuff like that I looked into, but you're never going to get anywhere with something like that. So I really didn't have a weekly way to work on that comedy. And even still, I write a lot of comedy, like a lot of stand-up. And I really didn't know what to do with it. And then like one day I was talking about politics with someone, and it just kind of came up. Like we were discussing something, and I just instinctively made a joke about it, because I understand it to a point where I can literally make jokes about it that you'll laugh if you understand it. And hopefully, my goal at least, is that even if you don't really understand the politics of it, you'll get the joke behind it. So, some of my idols are the likes of Bill Maher, who's, in my opinion, the best at it. Stephen Colbert, who, like, his characterization of a Republican is hilarious. Joe Rogan, for his stand-up, is like a huge inspiration for me. Not so much his political aspect, but his cadence, which shout out to people who have noticed that, but a lot of people say that I have similar cadence to him when he's doing his stand-up, because that's something that I've literally studied and tried to mimic in my, not necessarily mimic, but perfect, really, in my podcasting speech. So that's something that I've really worked on as well. And it just kind of all came together, because a guy I was talking to was like, whatever I had said, I couldn't even tell you what it was now. We were definitely talking about the American Revolution, though, for whatever reason. And I cracked a joke about something to do with like how many people had died. And it was a really bad joke, but it was a gun violence joke anyways. And yeah, he was just like, man, that's really funny. And it kind of hit me like, oh, this is what I should be doing. I should be talking about politics, but making fun of it, like doing something similar to what my idols do. Like the people I look up to, I don't want to be them, right? I never want to be on network television. Never, ever, ever. But I definitely want to talk shit about the people in power, because no one's ever going to, I mean, I shouldn't say no one's ever going to get upset. People get upset at me, but no one's ever going to be like personally offended unless they're just like, little bitches or something, which like, I don't care if I offend you. So it evolved into exactly that. So my very first episode, I didn't want to dive into politics. I wanted to teach something because I was a teacher's assistant in university. I ran tutorials, which are like 30-minute, or rather, they weren't 30 minutes. That's not true. They were just under an hour. It was 50-minute math classes for business math 1, the very first math class you take when you go to university for accounting, finance, marketing, and general business. So I love teaching, and I wanted to see if I could do it in a podcast. So my very, very first episode was the Mars exploration episode. So my very favorite topic. And yeah, so I talked about Mars exploration as the main thing, but I also wanted to throw some politics in there. So I added in the military transgender ban, if you remember that. That was a hot story that week. And Ontario's OSAP, the Student Assistant Program, it's basically a government loan to go to school here in Ontario. They had been talking about changes. So I threw in 2 political things along with Mars exploration, but I focused on Mars exploration because I wanted to see if I could teach. And I loved it. I recorded it. I loved it. I should have listened back to the episode. Actually, I haven't listened to it in a very long time. Probably not since like June or July of last year. But it showed me that I really wanted to do this. So I published the episode on February 6th of last year. And yeah, from there, it just went on. My second episode was Violence in Video Games in the Quebec Courts. And guess what that taught me? It taught me that nobody gives a shit about video games because that is, to date, the very, very worst episode I have ever done. It got the least amount of downloads, like, by far. It wasn't even close. I'm looking at it now, and it's actually come up. So right now it's at 22. But I looked at it in, like, November-ish, and it was at, like, 7. Like 7 people listened to my second episode. It's kind of come up now because I have more people that just go through and listen to all the episodes, which is awesome. Thank you very much. But yeah, this episode did really, really poorly. So the violence in video game episode died, and I literally on week 2 was like, holy shit. Week 1 was good. I don't know what the number was anymore. I can see what it is now, but it's inflated for sure. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, nobody likes my podcast. They all listened to the first episode and hated the second episode. So I went on and did an anti-vaxxer episode. That was my third episode, was anti-vaxxers and the Canadian Alert Ready system, which is that text notification you get when there's an emergency around. And that one boosted my numbers back up, and they never really dropped, at least not as low as the violence in video games thing. So then we just went through, and I started doing a whole bunch of stuff on Justin Trudeau. I called it Justin Trudun. Of course, he's not. But that was episode 4. Episode 5 was Trump and Kim Play Date 2. That was when they had their second meeting. And then talking about the growing economy into our 6th episode was about the economy. So really at the beginning, I didn't know what this podcast was going to be. So I thought it was going to be all about like hardcore politics. But it just turns out that you guys like episodes like the coronavirus episode where I'm just like, here's some simple facts. This is what's going on. This is what I think you should do about it or how you should feel about it. And then I kind of leave it up to you. Those have worked the best. And that kind of came to be around April. And this was my episode titled Arm the Homeless. So this is really where I fell into like, this is what I want to do. So I was talking all about, it was really a short rant about how homelessness had been taking over and how it was a really negative thing. It's an episode that I think you should check out if you're into my more like unscripted versions of this is what's happening in the world and this is what I think we should do about it. So from there, we went to Venezuela Fights Back. That episode did really well. And then Flat Earth. I did my first Flat Earth episode titled, Why Do People Think the Earth is Flat? This is maybe to date my second most difficult episode I ever did. I spent 3 weeks doing research for this episode, and generally I'll spend 5 days like reading and taking notes about something, 2 days writing, 1 day heavily writing, and then on the that seventh day I'll also do my recording. And yeah, so this Flat Earth episode, I planned on doing it 2 weeks before. That's why the Arm the Homeless episode was a rant, because I was supposed to do the Flat Earth episode, but I just was not ready. So I ended up doing the homeless episode, the Venezuela episode, and finally I was ready for Flat Earth. And I went deep into it, and I had so much fun. So if you guys want just like a really fun episode, check out Why Do People Think the Earth is Flat? Because I genuinely tried my hardest to answer that question, and I think I did pretty well with it. So you tell me what you think, but go check out Why Do People Think the Earth is Flat? That's from May 7th of last year. We get into then 2019's funniest stories and ... abortion. Honestly, don't remember that episode. So then the curious case of Vice Admiral Mark Norman. I'm going to click on this because I don't really remember this. The prosecution and reinstatement of Vice Admiral Mark Norman of the Royal Canadian Navy. Honestly, I have absolutely no recollection of that episode. So thank you for those of you that listened to it, because apparently it was something that I wasn't too into, because I don't remember it. We talked about how organ donation works then on the next episode. This was a really interesting one because I think I'd like renewed my license, and the girl was like, do you want to donate your organs? And I was, whatever. I said, sure. And then I started thinking about it, like, wait a minute, how does this actually work? Right? So I decided to do an episode on it. So if you've ever been curious how that works, I tried to keep it like not graphic. It's not like nasty or no shit like that. But yeah, go check out how does organ donation work. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff getting into politics, and the DNC was getting started, the convention at least. Early primary campaign rallies were starting. And then it wasn't until July 16th that I had my first conversation, and that was with Mate Parissa, who I had my old podcast with on YouTube. I decided to bring him in first because I was the most comfortable sitting down and talking to him because we had done so many episodes before. And that was actually a really fun one. I don't share my statistics publicly very often, and I'm still not really going to, but that episode did fairly well. But yeah, we talked about everything from politics to cultural appropriation and fighting. The UFC was really big. And this is the same week or like the week before. So a lot of people probably don't know, but we actually launched a live UFC watch-along show where we were like watching the UFC fights and talking about them. And the very first time we did it, we pulled something nuts, like 10,000 unique viewers or something crazy like that. And we thought like, oh my God, we found like we have a hit. People fucking love us. The chat was going crazy while we were talking about the fights, and people were like, oh my God, you guys are great. And then we did it again the next month. Literally less than 6 people watched. So not really sure what was going on there, but I throw darts at the dartboard when it comes to trying things like this. If I think it sounds fun, I'm going to try it. So Mate and I recorded our episode here. And then we went over to the UFC thing. I actually got a bunch of followers around then on the podcast. So if any of you still listen to the podcast, shout out to you if you're one of those 10,000 people. But yeah, then that died off real quick. So that's just a side note. We talked about black holes. We talked about Antifa. Are they doffed or are they dangerous? That's a Harry Potter reference, which no one ever emailed me about, and I'm very disappointed in you, my listeners. Then we talked about destroying the giants. And what was this episode about? This is the problem. When you do like episodes weekly and it's not your full-time job, like, you know what I mean? This is something I really care about and I'm really into it. But we're talking about August 6th. And I talked about, can a company become too large and do we need to then take them away? Because the Democrats, I guess, were or are still saying that we might need to dissolve large companies. But sometimes people will come up to me and say, like, hey, do you remember your episode Destroying the Giants? And they'll kind of tell me what I talked about. And honestly, sometimes it's like, oh, I don't remember that, man. Like, but you just listened to it, so for you, it's fresh in your mind. You're like, oh, you remember you did that episode. So if that ever happens, like, if anyone ever wants to come up to me and talk about the podcast, feel absolutely free to. You might need to remind me what episode specifically you're talking about and what was going on in it. But I have been caught off guard just last weekend. Shout out to Justin. We were at one of Blaine's shows, and he came up and started talking about a podcast episode. I was like, bro, I don't remember that. But either way, thank you for listening. And thanks, guys. So we talked about meteor showers, and then my biggest episode ever, the one I put the most effort into, it was Hong Kong's fight for freedom. When Hong Kong was under siege by the police, and these riots are still happening today, I would like to point out, we went hard into it. I spent 6 weeks. I talked to a few of my friends who are from Hong Kong to get their inputs on it. I talked with everyone I could who had some semblance of exactly what was happening, because the government was like hiding information, if you recall. They still are. But it was like I wrote an entire episode that was supposed to come out the week before on August 6th, and or I guess August 13th. And quite literally, as I was getting ready to, actually I had recorded it, and as I was getting ready to post it, I saw like a bunch of shit coming out about how the journalist that I had used had basically been lied to, and I had all this false information, and I couldn't publish I could have, but I chose not to publish the episode. And that was like literally heartbreaking, because when you put, easily I put about 10 hours into every episode, it sucks when all of a sudden all that work has to essentially be redone. But that's what I did. So yeah, that's on August 21st. If you want like an episode that is well researched, well thought out, start to finish, check out Hong Kong's fight for freedom. But now we're getting into the home stretch, because we're moving into August, where I was talking about undocumented immigrants, the DNC in the eye of the storm. I talked about Canada for a little bit and Canadian politics. And then I had my sit down with Adam the engineer. This is probably the most fun I've had doing a podcast, just because we really went back and forth. I've had a lot of compliments on this episode. This is actually the episode that if you're ever recommending someone check out the podcast, I would say check out L2L with, that's the branding that I use, by the way, if you didn't catch that yet. L2L with Adam the engineer. And I'll tell a side story about Adam. So I'm very good friends with Adam. I've known him for a very long time, but he is adamant. Adam's adamant, yeah, that we don't use his last name. So I was like, what the hell am I supposed to call you? Because it'll just come out, right, if I don't have something to call you. And he's like, I don't know, just call me Adam. I'm like, no, I can't do this. And live on or not live, but once we hit record, I just call him Adam the engineer, and it stuck. But I think he, like, actually really likes that nickname. He's legitimately an engineer, but he also like really likes the idea of having like a title like that. So since then, every time I see him, I've called him Adam the engineer. But that was a super fun episode. Adam is a staunch I wouldn't say he's not a Republican. He's a conservative, because he's Canadian and we don't have a Republican Party. But he is very conservative. I am very not. So it was a super interesting conversation to have, and it's one of those things that I really think everyone should take the time to sit down with someone they disagree with. And if you don't have that opportunity, I would love it if this podcast could do that for you. I always try to share both sides of an argument, and if you can listen to my discussion with Adam and take from it either you agree with me or you agree with him, or maybe you don't agree with either of us, but you can hear people talk about a different side. So about the first 50, it's exactly 53 minutes and 30 seconds of that episode was about guns and politics in general. And I seriously implore everyone to listen to it. It's a great starting point for anyone who's kind of mildly interested in politics but doesn't really know everything, if you just want to hear two people hash out their differences, because that's what politics at our level, at the citizens level, is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like, hey, what do you think about this? This is what I think. Oh, I disagree, and here's why. So take that and listen to that episode. That's L2L with Adam the Engineer from September 17th of last year of 2019. One of my favorite sit-down conversations that I've done. But then we got into Sober October. So, Sober October was fucked, guys. Like, absolutely fucked. We're talking about doing something again. Of course, both Trav and Mate are fathers. Me, not a father. So I have much more time to put into it, but the two of them still want to do it. But we're going to change things because if you recall, Sober October was all about getting these insane cardio scores. It was whoever could log the most minutes at high heart rates. And like we killed ourselves. Literally, I have not done like a full workout since Sober October finished. Oh my God, I fucked up my hip. I was literally limping for until about halfway through December. I couldn't put any weight on my left leg. I missed the finals of hockey last fall, which sucked. That was right around the time too that I took a high stick to the forehead. I talked about it a little bit, but I have this like wicked scar on my forehead because I took a high stick playing hockey. That's nothing to do with the podcast, but a side note. And then we had the Canadian election in the middle of all of this. So the episode called Canadian Election Results is another one that's done very well, and I've got great feedback on. And it's just an analysis of exactly what happened. So if you're interested in Canadian politics, check that episode out. It's pretty good. Then, yeah, I just kind of went on from there. I've kind of got into the groove with the podcast where now I pick things that I care about. Like I know this episode right now, it's probably not going to do very well because I'm just kind of talking about myself, and I'm someone who not many people are interested in. But I think that it's interesting to hear about how podcasts are made, so that's kind of why I'm doing this. And it becomes a flow when you're writing every week, because 7 days seems like a lot, but it's really not. Basically tomorrow, well, I'm doing an interview this week, but on a general week when I'm not doing it, it's not an interview, it's a conversation. I hate calling it interviews, and I apologize, Blaine. I am not interviewing you. We're having a conversation. But when I'm not doing a conversation episode, that means that tomorrow, basically, when I get up in the morning on my way to work, I'll be downloading a whole bunch of podcasts, finding out what's going on in the world, what's everyone talking about, and what do I want to talk about. And it starts from Wednesday. I start working on that next episode, doing my research, picking topics that are good, that I can make funny, coming up with little anecdotes and jokes. And I really practice just like Googling stories and writing jokes about them. So the second part here today, it's not going to take too long to get through. I don't think there should be much time left, but we're going to close this podcast just by me going through strange jokes that I wrote this week. So that's sort of what I do to pass the time, and that's how I come up with my podcast topics. I'll hear a news story that I think is funny, and then I'll research it. Like coronavirus, no, I didn't think that was funny. I mean, yes, I wrote some good jokes about it, but I didn't think that was funny. It was a major story that people wanted to hear about, and I loved doing it. But on a normal week, there's really nothing interesting going on in the world, right? I don't know how or why CNN and especially Fox News make the money they make because nothing interesting happens. And you learn that when you write a weekly podcast based on what's happening in the world. Because I don't want to repeat myself, but my God, I'd have to repeat myself if I was just strictly doing news, because shit does not go down. Nothing happens. Like the most interesting thing that happened this week was Trump did a State of the Union address. And what was I going to do? Come out here and play some clips and say, oh, and Trump got acquitted too. But we all knew that was going to happen. It's just like, who cares? Like, politics is inherently boring. And if nothing really interesting happens in the news, I got to figure something out and make it interesting for y'all. So that's my struggle. That's what I'm working with. That is my year in review. And next year, hopefully, we can sit down and look at this year, and it'll be even better. But if you've stuck with me this far, I'm going to get to some jokes right after this. Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and family. Tell them all about it. Mention it at work, and make sure they know about the vast library, 1 full year of content available completely ad-free each and every Tuesday right here on the Laugh to Learn podcast. As always, thank you so much for the support, and feel free to reach out to me anytime over on Instagram at Laugh to Learn, or using the contact page at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com, or really on any social media platform using hashtag Laugh to Learn or hashtag L2L. Thank you all so much for your time and dedication. And now, let's get back to the episode. Now to a special... that's a horrible intro. Let's restart. Let's kick it off with a special edition of This Week in Stupid, titled This Month in Stupid. A golden retriever named Finny this past week broke the world record for most balls fit in mouth. The video was posted online this week, and it's definitely worth checking out. And a Guinness representative will be sent to see the dog do the act, in person later this week to officially hand over the big prize. Now, there is no word yet on how Stormy Daniels is taking the news of her defeat. A big story this week came out that not everyone has an internal monologue. You may have seen this story on social media. Apparently, there are people who can't actually hear a voice in their head and instead think in different ways, such as seeing geometric patterns, colors, and shapes. Personally, though, it didn't come as a surprise to find out that the world is full of people who don't actually think, especially when Fox News Channel has the top 10 cable network TV shows, of which Sean Hannity currently has 5 of those spots. A new business opportunity has presented itself with something called the Race to Dinner. This is an evening-long event which will run you up to $2,500 per plate. That's $2,500 per plate, and it is geared towards white liberal women. Let me actually say that again. It's geared towards white liberal women. Sorry, guys. The idea is that you will enjoy a home-cooked meal, which you've prepared, for 2 women of color who will confront you and prove that you are inherently a racist. This is a completely true story, because aren't we all racists? The goal is to confront the white women paying to be there, regarding their racism and privilege, and so far, I honestly have to say, it seems like this is working, because all week, not one of my white female friends has used any racist language. An Ontario teen got a full-sized harmonica stuck in her mouth this past week and needed dental assistance to remove it. I'll leave it to you to decide what kind of recital she was practicing for. PETA is PETA-ing again with a petition to replace the famous Punxsutawney Phil Punxsutawney Phil. I can't believe I nailed that. The world's most famous really, Groundhog's Day groundhog. Now, for those of you outside of North America who may not know, Groundhog's Day is this strange event, thing, whatever, we do in the US and Canada, where we let a groundhog out of its hole on the same day every year, and if they see their shadow, they run back inside, which tells us there will be a longer winter, and the implication is we too should run back inside. But if he stays outside of his hole, meaning he doesn't see his shadow, then we will have a shorter winter. I know it's dumb. It's really something that you only see on like weird morning news shows, and in elementary school you care about it. Either way, PETA is moving to have Phil, the groundhog, replaced with an AI groundhog, which literally means that they want a human-created program that currently does not exist to give us a fake prognosis of whether or not winter will be long or short. Either way, if I was a member of PETA and I knew anything about the world right now, I, for one, would be focusing on those Chinese food markets. A 63-year-old Indian woman set the world record for most digits with a total of 12 fingers and 19 toes, though it really upsets me that she has more game than all of us. But at least we can all take comfort in the fact that she'll struggle to dial those numbers. And, Tinder exists now. And finally, Domino's Pizza is offering a $9,000 engagement ring with a small diamond-topped slice of white, yellow, and rose gold pepperoni pizza as the stone. All the guys listening, if your girl asks you for an ugly-ass $9,000 pizza slice ring, marry her. Thank you all so much for listening all the way through. I, as always, would love it if you took the conversations we have here out to the real world. I guess we didn't really talk about anything substantive today, but that's cool. I hope you were able to just sit back and chill for a week. Don't forget to come back next week and check out my episode with Blaine. I think it's going to be my best one yet. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you all are too. And yeah, hit me up over on Twitter or on Instagram, as I've talked about, or using the contact page at www.laughtolearnpodcast.com. Always, this podcast is completely ad-free. I was supposed to say as always. It's been a rough week. All I ask is you share it with your friends and family, subscribe on any podcasting app, look for us March 1st, launching brand new on YouTube. Tell your friends about me each and every week. And until next time, friends, please, I absolutely implore you, I beg of you, to keep on laughing and keep on learning.